I just needed to show you this that is doing the rounds on Reddit and various other places. It happened in Berlin last night.
Can you blow it up even? Blow it up a bit more if you can.
An activist group called Led by Donkeys. Shit, where did I put that? Where is it from?
Control scroll in. Control scroll in.
Yeah, I've got to find out what window I'm in. Stop it! You're making me panic.
There we go.
There we go. A group called Led by Donkeys projected Elon's little gesture, his odd gesture, and the word Heil in front of Tesla on the Berlin Gigafactory. Brilliant. Led by Donkeys. Well done.
All right. The anti-donkey when it comes to information, this is the smooth segue, mate. This is the what's the opposite of a donkey? I don't know. Let's just say a huge welcome to the show. First time for this year. First time of many, hopefully, for 2025 from the CTU economist, Craig Renney. Craig, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. I've been called many things in my life, but the anti-donkey is right up there. Thank you.
T-shirt, the anti-donkey. That's quite good. Okay. I quite like that. As opposed to Elon Musk, the Antichrist. All right. We should have a chat with you. How was your break, by the way? How was holidays? How was Christmas?
That was great, thank you. The weather here in Wellington was terrible, but can't complain. I'm from Newcastle. It's currently snowing in the northeast of England, so no complaints.
We have got you on today. Sorry, I'm just doing 10 things at once, which I always seem to be doing, because we want to have a look at the state of the nation, which is, I don't know, it's all politicians. It feels very kind of, Mr. Luxon, important state of the nation. It's obviously based on the State of the Union in the US. It's just, dude, hey guys, let's talk about this year. It's just a bit ridiculous. But we want to have a talk about it because he talked about it today, and we've got a story off Stuff. Labor responded to it. There's a bunch of facts and figures in the Stuff article. Maybe we can have a look at this all together and then we can talk to it. So here is 3 News, stuff.co.nz, and their report on Christopher Luxon licking his top lip. No, Christopher Luxon and the state of the nation.
His wake time precedes him.
The Prime Minister of New Zealand, Mr. 4:30 a.m, oat milk, trim, flat white, Christopher Luxon.
Christopher Luxon, the crack of dawn Prime Minister, bringing his breakfast energy to a business lunch.
And I want New Zealand to be a country of aspiration, of ambition, and of opportunity.
Yes, the focus today was laser.
Well, I'm here today to talk about the economy and almost nothing else.
Because it's not looking that great. Benefit numbers are going the very wrong way to hit the government's...
I don't know if that was Mr. Luxon's segue he wanted, but certainly stuff.co.nz, that was quite a slick segue into what they wanted to say. Let's just get that again, that slick segue. Here we go.
Nothing else.
Because it's not looking that great. Benefit numbers are going the very wrong way to hit the government's target of 50,000 fewer job seekers, with 213,321.
Craig, give us a perspective on that. I mean, Chewie showed us a graph last year that had a spike in unemployment at the global financial crisis, and then a spike in unemployment at COVID, and then the biggest spike of all was the last kind of 12 to 18 months under this government with none of those world crises. So can you give us a context at this number of unemployed right now and what it means and like what we should be?
Well, what we should be looking at is where we were just a couple of years ago, where we saw unemployment at 3%. And we saw the numbers of people on job seekers support heading for 5 figures rather than 6 figures. And the real challenge here is the number of people who are on job seeker support or other forms of benefits for longer than a year, because those groups are then the hardest to get back into work. And what we're seeing with record numbers of people entering job seeker support is that the job of government gets harder, but actually they're putting fewer resources into helping those people then get back into work. They're just parking them on job seeker essentially and saying that's fine. So with unemployment, we know continuing to rise in the future. We anticipate unemployment rising to about 5.5% by the middle of this year. That number is going to continue to grow, and it represents 213,000 families where there's somebody out of work, there's a household without an income, and those are people who In a normal economy, where we see growth or we see unemployment being lower, that number would be far lower. It would be heading towards the 140s rather than being 213.
When a government says our target's 114, at the moment they're at 213, I think we've quoted you a few times by, you said to us once before when you were on, that kind of a 4% unemployment could be expected at this time. Anything over that is a choice that this government is making. If you stand by that, does this government look at this and do they go, that's okay, we're going to get it to 140 at some stage? Or is this setting their ninth floor PR team's heads on fire looking at these numbers?
Oh, both is the honest answer. Their ninth floor PR team, and it's the 8th floor is with the PR team for the Prime Minister. But they'll be running around saying, well, how do we sell this as good news? But what they've done by their actions, removing the Reserve Bank mandate for maximum employment, by taking away support, and that was put during COVID and other programs to help people back into work, by taking away the first year free for tertiary education, by halving the support for apprentices at the last budget. All of these things are actions that say clearly the government doesn't care about the number of people on job seekers, otherwise it wouldn't have done those things. Otherwise it would actually be doing actively the opposite.
Yeah.
Now, 4% represents in New Zealand, there's a technical phrase, forgive me, gents, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, if you believe it, which basically is, that's about as low as you can get unemployment before inflation starts to go up. That's the theory. Plenty of people don't believe it, but that's the Treasury's view of what that number is. Unemployment now in New Zealand's 4.8%, rising further. There are plenty of things we could be doing to reduce that number, but we're not.
All right, let's keep going with the story, because Labor does have a response to this as well.
People now on a job seeker benefit, an increase of nearly 24,000 compared to the same period last year. That's despite benefit sanctions more than doubling in the same period, with 13,518 applied in the September quarter, up 7,000.
Better days lie ahead. And that if
Unless you're on a benefit getting sanctioned by this government
fucking
more
hope
harshly
they do,
than anybody else. Better days.
They're pretty
you're
grim
prepared
now.
to work hard, this country is an outstanding place to make that happen.
But we need more jobs. Luxon's eyeing up minerals,
Mining needs to play a much bigger role in the New Zealand economy.
declaring New Zealand open for business,
Growth means that there's a place for you.
starting with a new dedicated investment agency.
We have agreed to establish Invest New Zealand as the government's one-stop shop for attracting foreign direct investment.
John Key established something similar post the Christchurch earthquakes, Invest Christchurch.
Did you look at Invest Christchurch and how successful it was, and can you tell us how successful that model was?
Look, it wasn't. No, I was more interested in a national solution, and for me,
Did you notice their old mate on the right-hand side, whose name's just jumped out of my head? What's her name again, Chewie? On the right.
Judith Collins.
Judith Collins. Sorry, name just jumped out. Did you notice as soon as the question started, she started shaking her head? Did you notice that? Judith Collins, have a look again.
Christchurch.
Did you look at Invest Christchurch and how successful it was, and can you tell us how successful that model was?
Look, it wasn't. No, I was more interested in a national solution, and for me, my stimulation came from Ireland.
The PM set to host an international...
Just quietly, I don't ever need to hear the words "my stimulation came from Mr. Luxon as long as I freaking live. Let's just make that really clear. I do never want to hear anything about where Mr. Luxon's stimulation came from. And nothing about the back door again, Chewie. We've banned that. Not having that anymore, okay? Stop.
National Investment Summit in March, hoping global funds will fly plane loads of cash in with them.
Because there's a heap of money out there in the world. It's a wash
But do we
with
actually
world.
have projects ready to go?
Yeah, we do.
Like what?
Can I help with that
Yeah,
one,
sorry.
Prime Minister? Look, this is actually about getting money into
Do we have any projects ready to go? Yeah, we do. And before he gets to put his foot any further in it, Judith Collins. Oh, can I hear what you said? Can I help with that one? Can I help because Mr. Luxon needs help? Because yeah, we've got heaps of projects. Like what? Well, what I would say to you is, Judith,
It's a wash
But do we
with
actually
world.
have projects ready to
Yeah,
go?
we do. We do.
Like what?
Can I help with that
Yeah,
one,
sorry.
Prime Minister? Look, this is actually about getting money into the science and innovation areas.
Going all in on science, merging the 7 Crown Research Institutes into 3 and scrapping Callaghan Innovation.
What's going to be in place instead, absolutely focused on new technologies like quantum and AI and gene tech.
While National talked to the suits, Labor was still in its jandals.
Oh, they're great. You're forming my feet. Glad I cut my toenails. Look, it's a fairly relaxed way to start the year for us. It's our summer retreat, if you like.
After a year-long listening tour, they've learnt why Kiwis turned up their nose at the election.
But we also heard some home truths from them.
Sorry, we've got to get into this now, but Chewie, do you think they've heard? Based on what we were talking about before the show, do you think they've listened and heard well?
I don't think so. It's
All right, well,
my gut feeling, and we'll get into that a bit more later. I think they've got half of it.
Yeah, more of that a bit later.
That they felt that across our 6 years in government, we'd often overpromised and underdelivered.
But are now convinced that the public has already had enough of the coalition.
2024 was also, though, the year that New Zealanders got to see the character of this government. And it's pretty clear
Fair.
that they didn't like what they saw.
And despite the attire, it's time to get down to business, giving voters an alternative.
But we will be ramping up the pressure on this government.
Hipkins warning his caucus to focus on the basics: health, education, economy.
The other thing that we've got to do is make sure that we're calling out the politics of distraction. There is nothing this government wants more than for New Zealanders to be focused on culture wars.
The Prime Minister, of course, has the same goal, but his governing juggling act might make it harder to achieve.
Speaking of David Seymour, just Julie, he's about to become Deputy Prime Minister. Are you looking forward to that as much as he is?
Look, I'm the Prime Minister. We know what we're doing.
That wasn't a yes.
All right, so there we go.
Wait.
Lots of things to talk about in there. Invest New Zealand, foreign direct investment is an interesting one. What are all the projects that you've got lined up, Mr. Luxon? Well, you know, Judith got something to say about that. What was your response to the State of the Nation messaging today, Craig?
Well, I mean, the State of the Nation messaging started badly and got worse basically from there. And by starting badly, Mr. Luxon turned up and said, I'm going to talk just about the economy. I'm going to talk about the economy and almost nothing else. And then he spent the next 10 minutes talking about anything other than the economy.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
So he's clearly feeling the need. He's clearly feeling the stress that, that he's had to do this event. They're 1 year into a new government and he's having to justify to the public why he's Prime Minister and why the economy is going so badly. He said that, we're going to go for growth. The last time, I'm British, I recognise that going for growth language. That was Liz Truss in 2022, who said exactly that. We're going to go for growth. Approximately 3 weeks before, she was turfed. If you want Christopher Luxon to be a hype man, there was a brilliant backhanded compliment at the beginning of the speech where he said, "It's thanks to Nicola's efforts that we are seeing the dividend of careful spending and responsible economic management, even if so many Kiwis are still doing it so tough." So, it was responsible fiscal management, strong economic management, but all the Kiwis that I can see are doing it tough. Something doesn't add up there.
Can't have everything.
No, and he said, and we're going to be investing in what matters. Now, there are two large boats that would sort of disagree about that, for a start.
And a hospital. Don't forget a hospital.
Several
hospitals.
I was going to say not just one hospital, several hospitals, several hundred schools around the country that are still waiting for their rebuild program to be delivered. There's child poverty targets that have been expanded rather than shrunk. And I'd argue if you're going to invest in anything, ending child poverty is a very important thing. $107 million taken out of free school meals. There are plenty of things that we could be investing in, but we're just not. He said that we're going to, a growing economy is important, as if this was new information to New Zealand. But that's not what we've got. We've got an economy that's currently in recession, in the steepest recession since 1991. And we have unemployment rising to 5.5%. We've got business investment falling across the board and falling probably for about another year, according to the Reserve Bank, where essentially, and the government is essentially praying that the Reserve Bank cuts interest rates and in the hope that that delivers growth again. But it was really interesting, that Invest New Zealand program. We wanted to see investments in mining, tourism. We wanted to see farmers deliver new growth. We already have in New Zealand the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade that supports overseas investment. We have New Zealand Trade and Enterprise that supports New Zealand overseas investment. We have the Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment that encourages overseas investment. We have the regional development agencies of every area in the country that are encouraging overseas development and overseas investment. There's no shortage of actors and entities who are encouraging overseas investment. And we encourage overseas investment by having some of the most lax rules anywhere in the developed world about that overseas development. So investment. So it's not really, if a few more people working in an office in Wellington or somewhere overseas is the solution to your problem, you probably don't understand the problem. And so as a consequence, that's not going to be it. But if I may, there was one thing that I got quite offended about in his speech, where he said he was going to be they were going to essentially collapse all the Crown research agencies into one entity. Then that science was going to be the big driver of economic growth, gene technology, quantum AI. All of these things were going to be very important. They said those things like they knew what they meant. And to me, we've just fired 500 scientists in the public state who were doing exactly that job. He said that the problem was that we weren't incentivizing commercialization of research. We've been incentivizing commercialization of research in the public estate for the past 30 years. It makes no sense.
Chewie.
I found it really interesting that their solution to, again, monetizing science and research, research doesn't have any value unless we can monetize it somehow, of course, was to merge these three entities into a mega science clearance warehouse, whatever. Because merging things together is a good thing to do. It's efficient. It'll focus us, so that's good. That's good. Merging DHBs, very, very bad. Merging polytechnics, very, very bad. Merging council water entities, also very, very bad. So what's the difference? Is it only good when national merge something?
It's quite clear that the government doesn't understand what it wants from its science system here. It's quite clear it doesn't understand actually what difference it thinks it can make. Now, they quoted Denmark in this system as an example of one of the places they wanted to be like for science. Denmark has a huge and very active pharmaceuticals industry. Novo Nordisk is one of the biggest pharmaceutical firms in the world right now. They're the makers of Wegovy and other blockbuster drugs recently. Now, it may surprise you to know that most of those firms are run as not-for-profit charitable entities by Danish law.
I'm just imagining all the Americans watching right now going like this.
Yep,
Oh, actually, no. I hope they don't do that, because if their heads explode, they'd need healthcare. So we don't want that.
And the activities of that firm are supported heavily by the Danish government. The Danish government spends around 3% of GDP on research and development, which the entirety of the New Zealand economy manages about 1.5%. So, if it wanted to help, it could invest in science and research. It could invest in an active industrial policy to actually deliver us, the good long-term jobs that we want to see. It could be investing, in the infrastructure to do that, where we've seen that in Singapore, where we have industry transformation plans that actually did that in various sectors right across their economy. Unfortunately, at the election, we binned industry transformation plans because we had those in food, fibre, we had those in advanced manufacturing, we had those in building materials. They've all gone. We've binned much of the what they called basic science work in the country, which was actually delivering the research that we want to see and the innovation that we want to see. We've ended much of the regional economic development work, which will be necessary if you're going to deliver new mining jobs and new tourism jobs. We've just robbed the investor, so the tourism levy money, because that was supposed to be going to local authorities to help pay for local infrastructure, but is now going to the Crown because they're short of a bob or two. So there are plenty of things we could be doing. Unfortunately, saying them in a very nice hotel in Auckland, the Cordis, can highly recommend it, is not the same thing.
Sponsored by Kiwi Bank.
When sponsored by is not the same thing as actually doing it in government, and that's the challenge we have, is that actually they're not doing it.
I watched the speech as well, and I picked lots of things out of it. One thing I was interested about is the talk of we must repeal and replace the RMA, and whether that's the right or wrong decision to make. I have a very large concern. Chewie vocalised very well last night and probably on Monday, probably every night we've been on, is that how do you trust these guys? Because the last time they repealed and replaced something was the IREX ferries, and they didn't have a replacement plan. So they repealed and then they went. So with the RMAs, what are we going to, Resource Management Act, are they going to just go, right, let's scrap them? What are we doing next? We'll start working it out, because it is hard to trust this government with their act. We are judging them by their actions. So any of that kind of let's get rid of altogether is frightening in the world of politics and legislation right now, because when they seem to have done it in this term so far, they've gotten rid of stuff and they haven't had anything to come in. Like, fair enough, you have a neoliberal outlook on the world, so therefore you think it should be done like this. Right, but what they're doing is they're just getting rid of the way the other ones have done it, and they're not going, and we think it should be done like this. They haven't got that part of the equation, and I fear that's going to be the same for the RMAs. And
this is true of many areas of, Chewie mentioned getting rid of the DHBs and merging all the health boards back together, into the mega merger. The polytechnics, changing the entire adult education system. That has to go. We now have to go back to the existing regime we had, 5-10 years ago. It's really easy to say you don't like something. It's really easy to say that something is wrong. It's much harder to then put forward an actual, well, this is what we should then do differently. And we're in that find out part of the equation. Because we've decided.
Sorry, I could interrupt. Is that the fuck around and find out part? Is that the equation we're talking about?
You could say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Okay.
But in terms of we're in that part of the equation. Where we say, essentially, we've decided we don't like a lot of things, and like a 3-year-old having a tantrum, we decide to get rid of them, but we don't actually have any idea what we want. And so we're about to probably very expensively find out what life is like when you don't have an RMA system, and then we spend the next 20 years with the consequences of the decisions we make when we got rid of that system. Much like we did when we got rid of building standards, and we then spent billions of dollars solving weather tight.
Chewie, anything to wrap up with?
Oh, I've got so much. I love that he's mentioning mining. Of course, all the good mining is under national parks and areas of just supreme biodiversity that we will not be able to replace if we dig big holes in them. And I was watching Shane Jones's Q&A appearance the other day, where Jack Tane illustrated how small his thinking is about the benefits of opening up the mining in conservation estates. Basically, he was talking big, like huge. If you talk about, we want to double our royalty income from mining. I think it was 0.04% of GDP. If Shane Jones got everything he wanted, if all the estimates were high, that's the sort of impact that it will have on our economy. 0.04%.
Now, mining does
rip up some national parks,
and mining does create some very well paid jobs in some locations, but it's never going to be the mass employer that we need to turn around the figures you saw at the top of the show, where you've got 200,000 people unemployed. And how do you create jobs for them? Also, many of those people don't want to work in mining. It's hard, physical, difficult jobs. Why would they want that? That's not what they want to do. So
they want
it's never-
well-paying jobs.
Mm.
And it's just that mining happens to be a well-paying job. If you get them another one, they'll do that too.
You know, I'm the son of a coal miner, right? So they want well-paying jobs, but they want secure, well-paying jobs, right? And I can tell you, as a son of a coal miner, coal mining was paid very well. It wasn't very secure, and as a consequence, you know, this is the problem: is that you're just kicking the can down the road. You're buying a job or two instead of actually delivering the sustainable, long-term, you know, economy we actually want to see that's going to deliver those jobs.
The other thing I wanted to mention here is the tourism levy. As you quite rightly mentioned, they raided that kitty straight away. Nicola Willis was talking about opening up tourism again to boost growth, and immediately regional councils were going, if you're going to do that, we need help. We need help to deal with this influx of tourists, and you have raided the kitty, the fund that was supposed to help us do that. And then my final point is, when we're talking about opening up to investment, we are again ignoring the fucking elephant in the room. We have investment in this country that goes to housing. We pour all our money into a dead industry that produces nothing, and then we have to go cap in hand to overseas investors and say, you give us some money, we'll do all the hard work, and then you can extract all the profit as the only way of doing things. They still are ignoring the elephant in the room.
Well, essentially, I don't disagree with you. What we're highlighting here is that we've seen a speech and a very long conversation today, but what we haven't seen is a plan. We've seen some aspirations, we've seen some desires, but what we haven't seen is a plan. We've seen someone say, we must do something, but we haven't seen any roadmap as to how do we get there, any kind of sense of understanding of what would be necessary to deliver that. Instead, there's just simply sort of some kind of prayers to the economic gods to deliver growth in the hope that that will make us all better off, rather than a sense of actually how we do that.
When you spoke before, Craig, about it's easier to make these speeches in the Cordis Hotel, it's not actually happening in Parliament, though. I'm a little bit reticent at putting this example up, because when we start talking about musicals, Chewie loses his mind because he loves them so much. But for some reason, in the last couple of days, just by chance, I've started listening to Hamilton again. I just but listen, because I quite enjoy it. And there's a line in Hamilton. Sorry, Chewie, I know this is going to send you on how amazing these things are, and you know the fan you are of Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm sorry, we can't go there tonight, Chewie. I apologise. But he has a really good line when they're doing a battle, where he says, George Washington says at Hamilton, "Winning is easy, governing is harder." And I'm like, that's sort of, I mean, that's a good life lesson from Hamilton that you'd get, Chewie. But you know what I mean? That's what I hear you saying. It's like winning's easy. It's easy to be in opposition and go, you suck, you suck, you suck. And then you get in, governing's harder. And I reckon there's an element of that we're seeing right now. Not just that they're bad at this, but it's what they're doing is a harder job. It's harder to be the sports. It's harder to be the football star than to be the couch potato criticizing the football star. You know what I mean? And that's a part of what they're going through right now.
Well, it's also a problem of expectations, because they promised so much. They promised a laser-like cost of living focus that isn't working. They promised to solve the housing crisis. They promised to get the country back on track. They promised to end crime. They promised to so on and so forth. And, you know, you don't need to be an investigative journalist. You just need to look out of the window to know that these things aren't working. And that, you know, the plans that they have aren't delivering. If they were, they wouldn't need to be in the Cordis Hotel telling the country that they are working and they really do have a plan, because it would be self-evident.
Craig, as always, we look forward to your weekly spot on BHN. He says quietly. That's a joke,
I am working on the beard, Jen, so that's kind of...
That was a joke, Whānau. We're going to start up a new podcast called The Anti-Donkey, just because it's stuck now. So I think that's what we're going to do. But thanks so much for coming on, Craig. We'll catch up with you super soon. Always enjoy your input. And all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Craig.